From school, I went straight to Leander. In October, we went to the first long distance trial for under 23s in Boston. I was never much of a single sculler anyway, and we didn't have any Leander kit by that point. I think I'd probably borrowed like Dave Bow's all-in-one or something. I'd gone up, we started the race, I'd come down the corner, so about halfway, I guess we're about 2.5k in, like absolutely dying. I heard up ahead me, this guy shouted like, "Leander, move over." And he kept shouting like, "Leander, take a look." I was thinking like, I was so knackered. I was like, this fucking Leander guy better take a look soon. And I remember I just kind of like looked down at my all-in-one. I was like, oh shit, that's me. Literally like looked at that, like looked round. I was about to hit some massive tree, like managed to like jam a blade in, take a big stroke and avoid it at the last second.
Hey, what is up? Welcome to Last Stroke Counts. We've got another Q&A episode planned out today. But quick announcement before we get into the show. We are trying to give a custom painted red rotary machine away. It's a Concept 2 Model D. Essentially, our friends are trying to be the oldest crew to have ever crossed the Atlantic Ocean at the tender age of 65. It's going to be a pretty epic adventure. 3,000 miles from start to finish with nothing but salt water around them for about 60 days. It's called the Talisker Whiskey Challenge, and if you'd like to learn a little bit more about their charitable cause or enter the giveaway, just go to rowgear.com/giveaway.
Yeah, I'll just add quickly, we're going to have our row machine with us at Met Regatta and Marlow Regatta. We'll be down at those events and you can come and sign on there. We've had varying success with that. I think people just can't believe that you could win a row machine for a £5. So we kind of keep having to convince people that, it's a £5 entry and someone is going to win it for £5 on the 3rd of July at the end of Henley. But yeah, so we did have a guest for this week, but we've rescheduled. And given the success of some of the other episodes we've done, especially the Q&A, we thought we'd throw it out there and put some questions in. And we've got a few interesting ones, done a little bit of research. I think it could be some fun stuff to talk about. So, ready to go?
Yeah, let's get it going.
Cool. So, Archie is the first one who asked questions. It actually asked a couple of questions, but we'll just break them down into a few parts. So, number one, first one from Archie is, what is the maximum cox weight?
That's a good question. I thought coxes had minimum weight.
Yeah, I think the short answer is there is no maximum weight. Most people know that there is a minimum weight. So in Great Britain, the minimum weight for a cox of a men's crew is 55 kilos, and for a women's crew is 50 kilos. That's now changed in world rowing because men and women can now cox either side. So the minimum weight for men's or women's crews at world rowing events is 55. But yeah, in terms of maximum cox weight, so I think weight is discussed a lot with coxes, and crews do often want their coxes to be as light as possible. We discussed a little bit with Morgan about when she was coxing Oxford, especially the year she won the women's blue boat. Do you remember what year that was? 2016, yeah. In that year, she was struggling to make weight, and her coach at the time actually sort of said to her, listen, let's focus on doing a really good job on being the best coach that we can be, the best cox that you can be, having your best performance, and let's not worry too much about 1 or 2 kilos. So, and I've had a similar situation when I raced at school. Our cox was 5 kilos overweight, but the benefit of that cox that had been with us for 3 or 4 years, how well he knew the crew, how well he could get us to respond, outweighed anyone who was lighter than him. So as a crew, we made the decision to take him. So I did a little bit of research, and I sort of found this is actually quite interesting to me. So an Oxford University physics lecturer estimated that an additional 10 kilograms or 22 pounds of dead weight in an 8 causes a 0.2% loss in speed, which would equate to 0.6 seconds for a 6-minute race, or 4 meters, approximately 1/5 of a boat length. So this is kind of interesting because when I said this to you, you kind of thought that was...
I thought that was quite a lot.
A lot, whereas I would have said I didn't think it was that much. Mm-hmm. If you're looking at things that could increase or slow down your boat by half a second or 4 meters, I think there are plenty of other things you could do. And actually, having read that for me makes me think, oh, do you know what? Actually, having a cox that's 5 kilos overweight, which would equate to, if this made sense, to about 2 meters difference, or 0.3 of a second, then unless you think that you're on a race that you're going to win or lose by 0.3 of a second, then worrying or stressing over that extra 5 kilos seems irrelevant.
Yes, to clarify, I didn't think it would be too much in terms of picking one cox over the other based on just that factor. I just didn't realize that 0.2% of speed overall over 6 minutes would equal 4 meters, which is
Right.
I thought that was quite a distance.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't gone in, I haven't sort of worked this out myself and sort of just taken these facts from where I found them online. But it's an interesting point just to go across. And I think a lot of coxes potentially worry a lot about weight. I know sometimes crews can be pretty harsh. They will get weighed quite a lot throughout the year. It's going to be something that's on their mind. And again, when we spoke to Morgan, she said a lot about, the best performance is more important than the absolute lowest weight. So if there's someone out there who maybe isn't 55 kilos and thinks, I'd love to give coxing a try, until you're right at the top end and you're winning and losing by fractions of seconds, absolutely have a go. Don't let that put you off from getting in and getting stuck in and having a go.
Yeah, so like a 5 kilogram difference would equal 2 meters based on that study. So if you have a cox that can make sure that your crew can pull harder and you can make up those extra 2 meters, and I think, the weight it's more negligible than not in this scenario, because, if the quality of your steering and the quality of your calls can make more of a difference, then you shouldn't like really sweat yourself out the day before the race, make yourself feel like absolute shit when you turn up to the start line. Just make sure you're at your best, because then you can get the most out of the crew. And that's also like going to help them perform better than necessarily the 0.3 of a second that you'd otherwise have from just pure weight.
Yeah, I think it definitely proves that that your ability as a cox, your ability to steer, your ability to control the boat, is certainly going to outweigh, pardon the pun, the how much you weigh, potentially, in comparison to other people. So and certainly I would say to anyone who's just getting started that weight really is not, especially juniors as well, it's really not something you need to concentrate on a lot. The fact that you're getting involved in the sport, as a cox, we've spoken before, make sure you get involved in those sessions, fitness sessions and things like that, be part of the team. That's going to have a bigger benefit than on your health and your ability to do that job than just worrying constantly about specifically how heavy you are.
Definitely. And don't try to starve yourself before the race, trying to lose that extra kilogram or two, because actually the ability to think faster on the day is going to make much more of a difference. I completely agree with that.
Yeah, Morgan definitely sort of touched on that as well. And she said, when she was really struggling, because also she was doing men's and women's events. So she said she was sort of floating between 55 and 50 kilos and struggling to get down to that lower weight. And she really saw that when she was at her lowest weights, she kind of had like a brain fog. She was a bit slower in thinking. And like you said, we discussed that 2016 boat race. That was a quick thinking decision that the cox had to make that ultimately won the race. So when you're going to weigh up those what's more important, I think definitely that's it. Hopefully that's answered the question. But again, if you want anything else, just get in touch with us and we'll talk through some more stuff.
Perfect. So what's our next question?
Question 2 is, what are the requirements to be a GB cox?
What are the requirements to be a GB cox? I'm not too sure.
Well, number 1 would be being British, or having a passport or ID that proves that you're British,
or having a grandparent.
Yeah, I think for world rowing events, you need your own passport. There are certain other events, sort of internal events like home and international countries, where the requirement to row for England, Wales, Scotland, or Ireland would be to have a parent or grandparent that was born in that country as a minimum. But the question was for a GBR cox, what are the requirements? So yeah, being British, I did look this up because I thought if you'd rowed for one country, you could never row for another country. But the rules are slightly different now. You can't row for 2 countries in the same year.
Mm-hmm.
And if you've already rowed for one country, you cannot row for another country until you've held that passport for 2 years. So these are the two little facts I found.
That's pretty similar to like how it works in like other sports, like in football, and just with like the dual citizenship.
Yeah, the world's a bit more global now. Lots of people have dual citizenship and things like that. So there's that. But then just in terms of, if we're just talking about how would you take your coxing to the next level, how would you get to sort of be a British rowing cox? There is a trials process that happens every year, and it normally starts in October for the seniors. I think it's when's the junior first trial?
I think it will be probably around the similar time.
A little bit later, isn't it?
It's when they do the Raid Cup 5K, I think.
Yeah, I think November. But yeah, so the simplest thing would be, definitely if that's something you wanted to look at, go and speak to your coach. They're going to have the information for you that's going to, going to give you like when you need to apply, what you would need to do, what trials and processes you would need to be going to. Obviously, we've mentioned it, weight. Generally at trials, when you turn up at trials, you will get weighed. So like we said, when you're starting to get up more to the sharper end of racing, the higher end of racing, international racing, weight does become a little bit more important. But a lot of that now is really to make sure that you're not going to be doing any heavy cutting. So the reason why they will try and weigh you earlier out is to make sure, okay, this person isn't going to try and lose 8 kilos in the next 3 weeks. They are they're a bit hotter now on making sure that the weight gain and loss that coxes are making is sensible and healthy.
So is there like a trialing process for a cox specifically where they can put down a performance, or like, for example, when you did under 23s in coxed events, did they take coxes based off of the account of the racing that they've done, for example, during the circuit, Wallingford, Met Marlow, and Henley, or was there like a different criteria?
Yeah, so I think as far as I know, it's sort of similar to athletes. So when I first got involved in under 23s, when I was 19, we won Henley. So off the back of that crew, the guys that were eligible for under 23s, GB rowing sort of became aware of. And I think on that next year, then we went to the first trial. First trial is generally always open, so anyone can go. Obviously, for rowers, they can put down a performance. For coxes, they can't really show themselves off until they get into crew boats. But from that point on, if you've made yourself aware to GB rowing, or your coach has, they'll generally keep an eye on you and your results. You will normally be asked to provide recordings of some of the races that you've done in order for them to assess you, because throughout the year you'll be racing with your club, obviously not with a team. There are certain events throughout the year. So for junior coxes, they have Munich Regatta, which is an international race, but sort of still during the season, and give coxes a chance to put a performance in before selection. But yeah, in terms of requirements, really, it's mostly just make yourself known to those people. Again, I would say speak to your coach first, have a discussion on whether you feel like it's something you're ready for, whether that extra commitment or having to go on extra camps and things like that is something that you're able to do, whether you're at school, at university, things like that. And then from that point on, just listen to what the coaches want off you, and sort of goes from there, I think.
So as a person who's not from the British system of rowing, I'd probably also say, like, if you're trying to make yourself known to the coaches, definitely show that your coxing has a really positive impact on a crew. So if, for example, there are many different coxes who swap in and out of boats, your crew boats, throughout the year, definitely make sure the crew is happy to work with you and just sort of try and make an impact. So in our previous Q&A, we spoke a little bit more about how you can do that, and Morgan also gave some great insights on that. Just in general, just be in control of the crew. Make sure the crew never has to like really consider steering, because you've just already taken care of it. And then just build a good relationship with your teammates to sort of get the most out of them. Just learn what makes them tick, and then just cover those bases. If you have a good arsenal of calls and your steering's on point, and you can be trusted by your coaches to go and do that race, I'm sure that's definitely going to contribute to them putting a good word in for you with the masters, that be probably like the British rowing selection team.
Yeah, there's information online. You could go on the British Rowing website and have a look at selection criteria and things like that. If it's specifically something you're looking at doing, Archie, and you want a bit more information on that, drop us a message. We will be with Morgan Byron Williams, GB Cox on Saturday, so I could get a little bit more of the lowdown on the specifics of that, whether it's sort of junior, under 23, senior, or whatever. But yeah, again, hopefully it's sort of a wide range approach to anyone who might be interested in making that step up.
Awesome. Yeah, I think that covers that question. So Archie sent one more, I think.
Yeah, so last one, he's obviously going for the sliders, putting in multiple questions, but it's another great one. It's how do you become a rowing coach?
I'm not sure what the official requirement for that is, but I would say if you want to consider becoming a rowing coach, definitely be passionate about the sport, have a love for it. Helping other people definitely has to be something that naturally comes to you, and that's something that you're interested in, because obviously with coaching, it requires a lot of patience. It requires a lot of sometimes repeating yourself to explain concepts that, are sort of known and obvious to you, but not necessarily to the athletes who've just picked up rowing. But in terms of how to become a coach, I would probably say if you don't love rowing, you're going to have a harder time sort of putting in those like extra long hours. Because like with coaching, it's very similar to sort of being an athlete in a sport where like you still have to be involved with a multitude of sessions throughout the season, throughout the week. You don't get that many days off. You don't get that much time off. So just be prepared to stick it out. So definitely loving rowing would help.
Yeah, I think to start with, I mean, if you're thinking about asking that question, I would assume that you do have a love for the sport. I can't think of any program I've ever been involved in that has an abundance of coaching. So any school or club environment that you're in, if you feel like you'd like to get involved and start helping, I can't see any club turning down a bit of extra help. First, again, I would speak to your coach and just let them know. I would think the first port of call would be to shadow them, kind of see what the job looks like from the other side, because it is a little bit different. I think you can, as a rower, you see a rowing coach every day, you see what they say to you, you think, I could do that. But when you're out on your own, there is a little bit more organization and things like that to do. So first thing I say would definitely be kind of shadow your coach. Try and go out. If you're J18, you can maybe try and do some sessions with the younger kids. Like every novice who gets rowing is going to need help. And again, I don't think there's any club who couldn't use an extra pair of hands when it comes to starter sessions or taster sessions or novice sessions and things like that. Obviously, like you said, willingness to learn, patience. I think one thing about rowing is because we all learn it at a later age, generally sort of 13, 14 years old, we're much more able to remember the time when we were rubbish at it. In other sports, sometimes, you see kids picking up skiing at sort of 3 years old. They can't ever remember ever being rubbish at it. So when you get to 20, you might be a bit less impatient. I've always found with the athletes I've coached, especially at colleges, when every year we get an influx of new novices, generally they've been really positive, really supportive, and about letting other people learn the sport. And at the end of the day, if you love rowing and you want other people to love it, then it's going to take a bit of patience. Like we all know that rowing is such a new skill and there's so many different things to learn from the first, from go, that it takes everyone a little bit of time to get into it. And that will give you a good sense of, whether you feel like you want to do it before you go any further. But then in terms of what it takes to become a qualified rowing coach, sort of a level 2 coaching qualification is generally the minimum requirement for most coaches, sort of coaching positions, coaching jobs around the UK. There will obviously be some assistant coaches and people that don't have that. But if you were looking at leading a program, you would probably be required for the level 2 coaching qualification. All the information that is on the GB Rowing website. If you're a member already, you can get access to I think it's called the Hub portal. There's a bunch of different lessons that you can learn, like online lessons, like cold water and hypothermia online lessons, capsize drill online lessons, risk assessment, things like that. There's a few modules that you can work through. They're all free. You can access them for free if you're a member. And then once you've done all those and capsize drill, I think you definitely need to do an online capsize drill. You might also need to do an in-person capsize drill. I need to double check on that. You can then book yourself onto a course. If you have a look again on the British website, there are a number of courses generally over the summer. I think they're 4 or 5 day courses. I think 5 day course, and it's £500, which is fairly reasonable for sort of 5 days of coaching. A lot of that is not necessarily just about how to coach rowing. A lot of that will be based around, like what I said, like risk assessment, managing risk, looking after athletes, safety, things like that. The other things that you need to learn to become, a coach who could take sessions on their own. And then generally what you do is you keep a diary after that course with some coaching sessions. And then generally, I think they say about 4 to 6 weeks later, someone will come out and assess you during a rowing session, make sure that it's safe, that you know what you're talking about and you're doing. And from that point, you then get your level 2 coaching qualification.
Yeah, so some of those courses will include fixed seat and sliding seat, I think the underwater ones. Another thing that we've had to do in order to kind of like coach college rowing as well was the safeguarding and protecting children course. And another thing that you might want to look at if you want to take coaching seriously is first aid at work, because ultimately
you have to have that. Yeah,
you're going to be responsible for other people's like health, and whatever happens, then you'll be like in charge of that group of people. So I think definitely having some form of first aid literacy and knowledge isn't going to be a detriment to your journey into becoming a coach. But I also really, really like what you said about, I completely agree with that. No clubs have an abundance of coaches. So there's going to be events or weeks where some coaching staff might be a little bit short on the personnel side of things. So just go out there and volunteer for a few sessions, see what that's like, because it is different on the other side. It's not exactly, like you said, what athletes always imagine coaching to be. So just being on the other side, in the flesh, in the first person experience, if you do that like a few times, see, maybe you enjoy it more than you did, or maybe you think, oh wow, that's actually quite a lot of responsibility. I'm not sure I'm ready for that yet. And then you just pick it somewhere down the line. But yeah, love the sport, offer some volunteering, see if you like it, and definitely take a note of all of those courses that you'd need to complete in order to get going on your journey.
Yeah. I definitely would suggest, like we said, volunteering and having to go first. You don't want to just, the first thing you do to sign up to this £500 course and then do it and then find that you don't want to do it. Again, from experience, I've done jobs just as a sort of part-time or assistant coach, and that's very fun because quite often you're just doing the coaching. So you're turning up, someone else is organising, setting the crews. You get to just go out and really focus on coaching rowing, which I found really fun. As you get a little bit higher up, as you start to get in charge of programs, you'll find out there's a lot more organization. A lot more of your time will be spent organizing people and training camps and putting entries in for races and things like that. So yeah, that I would say would leave to a bit later. For most people, rowing themselves is the best start to then coaching. Obviously, when you start to do things like video analysis and stuff, you're essentially learning how to coach yourself anyway, which makes it much easier to coach other people. But it's not essential. And something we learned the other day is that Jürgen Grobler never rowed, apparently, as far as I know. He went straight into coaching. So one of the best coaches in the world was never an active rower. So again, if you haven't rowed yourself, it's not a total barrier to entry.
Awesome. Yeah, I think that should definitely get you started on your journey to become a coach. Do we have another question?
Next one. Yeah. So this one's from Nicola. It's a two-parter as well. She said, what's the favorite race you've ever watched? And then your favorite race that you've ever done?
Okay. Should I start on this?
Yeah, go on.
So I'm going to start off on the first race the favorite race that I've watched. So for me, I've never had my hair jump up so high as when I was watching, I think it was the 2010 World Rowing Championships in New Zealand on a Lake Karapira in the men's pair event between the Kiwi pair versus the British pair, which was of Andrew Trix Hodge and Pete Reed. And honestly, even I don't want to spoil what happened in that race, but it was very, very close. And up till the last 50 meters, it could have honestly gone either way. And obviously, having now seen that the Kiwi pairs had an unbroken streak of like something like 60, 70 wins and gold medals, something like that, they said that that was the only race where they were like, oh shit, we might actually lose this. So they put them under so much pressure. And honestly, I just love good, tight, close racing. So there is some other examples of close races, but that was definitely one that just like really made me look and just be like, wow, that's what max effort really looks like. And that is how you put an unbeatable crew under pressure. So I wish to see more racing like this in the future. And obviously what the British 8 has done at the European Championships was just taking the gold off Romania in a margin of like 0.05 of a second. Like, that's incredible. Like, we want to see more of this, and it's more of a testament to how and why every stroke in your training session matters.
Yeah, it's a difficult one. I've watched so many races, obviously, over the years. I was very impressed with the British 8 in London, challenging the German 8 that had gone 4 years unbeaten, and really like putting everything out there to have a go at gold. I thought that was, really, really impressive, and potentially, might have got a lower medal at the end of it for making that decision. But ultimately, I think they get to walk away happy knowing that they gave it a shot. I thought that was impressive. But the favorite one I've watched, just in terms of just being amazed, was in about 2010, I was on a winter training camp in Banyoles, which is the lake in Spain where the 92 Olympics was held. And I got injured. I hurt my back pretty badly, went and had a scan, and they were like, yeah, no, you can't row. So everyone else had gone out rowing that day, and I was just sat with nothing to do in the centre. And I'd heard a lot about this crazy finish from the Cox pair in Barcelona, Greg Searle and Johnny Searle and Gary Herbert, I think, coxing. I'd never seen it, and it was like one that I just sort of never watched. I thought, well, I'm out here in Banyoles. I was rowing on that course yesterday. I'm gonna watch it. So I had a little look on YouTube and found this race. Sort of came up. I was like, okay, cool, here it comes. And watching this race. And literally, like, oh, I was like, that's where I was turning. It's pretty cool to see these Olympic races going on the course that I'd been training on. And they go off, and the first half, I think it's the Italian pair, the Abignalis, again, like really unchallenged, like consistently had been winning a lot. Come through the K, they're really, really far ahead. Come through the 750, they're still really far ahead. Come through the 500, like they're still really far ahead. And I started thinking, like, this must be like the heat or something. Like this can't be the final. There's no way this can be the final. And I even when they got to like the last 250, so the red boys come through, they're still like at least a length of clear water back. And I'm like, I was there yesterday. Like, I know how short that is. Like, there's no way they're going to do it. I'm just convinced myself that I must have not been watching the Olympic final. And then somehow, it's such a storm at the end. They come through and take the medal, and I was like I knew the race I was watching. I'd heard the story 10 times over. I specifically searched that race, and yet with 250 go, they had so much ground left to cover that I'd convinced myself I wasn't watching it. So I think for that reason, that's probably my favorite race.
What? I have never heard of or seen that race. That's pretty incredible. After we finish recording this, I'm gonna go and watch it because it sounds epic.
It's also randomly, I'm just pretty cool that I'm going to service Johnny Searle's row machine tomorrow. Having said that, that's pretty cool. We met him at Wallingford Regatta. Yeah, we're gonna go and fix his row machine.
That's pretty cool. Make sure we make sure to send that video over to him, and then just say, hey Johnny, do you remember that race?
Of course he remembers that race. So section 2, part 2 of Nicola's question was favorite race that you've done.
Okay, you start this one off. I need to think about this.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's like so many that I've been a part of. I think again, I'm going to have to do the sort of cheesy answer and come back to my Thames Cup crew. I think just the whole year and how it all went, the ups and downs, and the belief that we had in ourselves. I remember when we won on Saturday and we were in the final, just a sense of calm of being like, right, we've done, like we said we were going to get to the final, like everything's done, we didn't mess up, we didn't stuff anything up, like now it's just our time to like put the performance of a lifetime in. And I think that's what we did the next day. And we've talked about it before, obviously, with John and Dave, and I'm sure we'll talk about it again. So I'm not going to go into too much detail. But yeah, I think that one's, for me, the one that stands out.
Yeah, if you want to know more about that Thames Cup race, check out the episode we did with Dave Bell, because he was also part of that crew. So it was a solid chunk of it. It was Tom and Dave reminiscing about the days of the old and what rowing was like when you're 18. But I think I figured out what my answer is going to be for this one. So it's probably not the most exciting race that I've done, but probably the one that put me ahead the most. So I remember coming to England for the first time as a 16-year-old, and then just by some draw of a luck, I managed to get myself into trialing at Leander. And so I remember I was in the single, and I did a few sessions with the junior squad with my coach at the time, Lavinia. And she took me to Reading Amateur Regatta, which was the first regatta that I've ever done in England. And bear in mind at that point, my English was terrible. So I was just stressed because I didn't want to miss my race, and I didn't really understand because the rules were a little bit different to what racing is like in Poland. But I ended up going and racing at I'm not sure if it was a champ event, but it was a single scull event at Reading Amateur Regatta, coming up on 9 years since that happened, so a long time ago. But I just went through a few rounds. I remember sitting at the start line, and then some man from the bank shouts, "Piotr Joel." Yeah, I'm like, who is that? That is oh, that's me. Okay, cool. So I line up at the start, and then I went through a few rounds, beat some people. It's a 1500 meter event, so it's side by side. So I love side by side racing, and especially 6 lanes is good as well, but I've never experienced that type of racing when it's just me versus just one other person over 1500 meters. And there was a little bit of steering involved and on that stretch of the river in Reading. So that was super cool. And then I remember in the final, I came up against a 24-year-old from Birmingham Uni, and he only beat me by half a length. And I was 16 at the time. So I thought that was a good result, but that concluded my trials at Leander. So obviously at that point, I didn't know what was going to happen, whether I would be accepted or not. And then Lavinia said that, I need to speak to the boss about this. And by boss, she meant Banksy, who was a chief coach at the time. And turns out that race was enough to impress the coaching staff at Leander enough so that they offered me a place in the junior squad the following year. So I think that I didn't think about this before ever, so thank you, Nicola, but I think that might be one of my favorite races, or one of the ones that put me ahead the most.
Did you race in Leander kit?
I did, yes. So I did have to give it back as well.
I told you about the first time I raced for Leander.
Not on the podcast.
So I left from school. I went straight to Leander. It was going to be my gap year, and then I never left. And in October, we went to the first long distance trial for under 23s in Boston. And we didn't have any Leander kit by that point. We had to borrow some kit. I think I probably borrowed Dave Bow's all-in-one or something. And I was never much of a single sculler anyway. And I always sort of suffered at Boston, as everyone does. So I'd gone up. We started the race. I'd come down the corner. So about halfway, I guess we're about 2.5K in. Absolutely dying, just trying to keep some pace on the boat. And I heard up ahead me, this guy shouted "Leander, move over!" And he kept shouting "Leander, take a look! Leander, take a look!" I was thinking I was so knackered. I was like, this fucking Leander guy better take a look soon. And I remember I just kind of looked down at my all-up. I was like, oh shit, that's me. I'd totally forgotten I was racing Leander. Literally, looked at that, looked round. I was about to hit some massive tree, managed to jam a blade in, take a big stroke and avoid it at the last second. But it's just so in the box. That's an expression from Nico Wright. I said if I ever use that expression, I'd give him credit for it. But yeah, I was absolutely just on another planet, just totally forgotten what club I was even racing for. I got a bit better after that. Remembered I was Leander.
Sick. All right. What's the
next one? The next one's from Charlie. Interesting question. When did you give up in a race?
So I don't like the word give up. Give up isn't something that I would consider having done in a race, because you just never give up unless you outright stop rowing or force yourself to stop rowing by capsizing, which I don't think I've ever done in a race. You don't just give up and get off the course and be right, I forfeited, I'm calling it quits, it's a DNF. That's just not something that happens. But there can be times at regattas where you will sometimes think, okay, the race is over. Like, there's not really, like, I know I fucked up here and this is my best performance. I just got to get through to the finish line. And it's not probably the most optimal performance that you could have done, or you're not super happy with it, but you still got to get to the finish line, because putting a time on the board is super important. So I remember that one of my first races in Poland, it was the first time I ever stroked a coxless quad with a foot steering inside. And I've never ever trained that before. And the coach was like, yeah, it's fine, just keep your foot straight. And I was like, yeah, okay. So we go up, and it was in Poznan at the beautiful Lake Malta. So we go up to the start line, and I think we started in like one of the earlier lanes. So like lane 1, lane 2, something like that. I can look it up at one point. And it was a 2K race. It was one of the first times where I've raced 2K, because as a J14 in Poland, you only race over 1,500 meters, but I digress. So it was one of the first times I've done 2K race. We must have done like 2.5K on that race course. I remember drifting from like lane 1 into lane 6, lane 7, coming back over, just doing a massive like round of zigzagging. And it's like, oh, I still have to stroke this, but fuck, like the competition, we could have been better than them, but I'm pretty sure we ended that race outside of the race course, like not even in lane 0. So outside of the warm-up lane, next to like one of those big boys that's there, that's right next to like where they measured the time for the race. And we still came third, which is a bit funny. But that was like one of the times where I didn't give up. I just didn't want to be rowing anymore in that race. I just wanted it to be over. It was just too much for me.
Yeah, it's a weird one. I've never sort of just like stopped, and there's any race where I've literally stopped and given up. I always would say to my athletes, like when it comes to racing and also on the Ergo 2K, really, whatever happens, however bad you feel, however exhausted you get, finish it. Definitely finish it, because I've seen athletes who sometimes when they sort of feel like it's not on, or they're not going to get the score they want, they stop halfway through. That really kind of starts to produce a psychological barrier where then the next time you feel like it's not happening or you're not getting a score you want, you start stopping, and then that can get to a stage where you find it really difficult to break through that sort of psychological barrier again.
Yeah, Cara spoke about this when she came over on our podcast. She mentioned something what's called a neurological pathway. So every time you do something, a connection in your brain is formed, and then the neurons know that they can fire like from one direction into another. So like every time you do an action, that neural pathway gets strengthened. So if you stop once, the reason why you shouldn't stop, even though you want to, is because you will create that neural pathway, and it'll be easier to stop again. And if you do it again, then there's going to be that you're going to be strengthening that connection. So that's something that you really, really want to avoid, which is why also people have a hard time breaking out of bad habits, is because that neural pathway is just so strong. You need to actively like really work against it.
Yeah. There's obviously been situations where for example, if you are in sort of an AB semi and the top 3 crews get through, there might be a situation where you're comfortably in 3rd place, and it would require a lot more effort to challenge for first. And tactically, there would be a decision to not then try and kill yourself for first, because you're going to get another chance at them in the final. So sometimes there are some sort of tactical reasons for winding down or taking the pressure down. I mean, I think also, there's been some times when like physiologically I had just run out of steam. And I think the second ladies plate final that we lost to the German senior B8 that went to the European Senior Championships that year, we took an early lead on them, but they just kept charging and were towards the finish. I remember sort of only had a few strokes left to go. I was absolutely had nothing left, and I sort of looked over and saw that they'd got through us, and my body just kind of collapsed. I didn't stop rowing, but yeah, just felt like there was just absolutely nothing left. So there's been times when that's happened. But straight up given up, no, I think you want to do absolutely everything you can to avoid that. I have much more respect for an athlete that maybe messed up their pace, absolutely blew their doors off at halfway, but still got through the finish line, than someone who went out, like a cat out of hell, or whatever the expression is, and then sort of finished. I think whatever happens, it's important to make sure that you get through that finish line, and you can look back and reassess and change some things for the next time you race. But you don't want to get into that habit of just thinking, oh, I can't win now, or I'm not going to get that place I thought I was going to get. Oh, it's not worth it. Like, don't do that.
Yeah, giving up is not an option, because even a bad result, it's still a testament of something that has happened. And if it's not the result that you wanted, then that means something needs to be changed, something needs to be fixed or altered or improved for next time. So rather than just get bogged down by a bad result, think, okay, why did that go wrong? Just start going through and analyzing it. And then for the next time, you can try and come up with a better plan or a strategy where something like this can be avoided.
Yeah. And again, we sort of spoke before about in terms of giving up or helping yourself from not giving up. One of the best things that you can do is have a strong bond with your crew. Think about that you're working for each other. They're working for you, you're working for them. Or even if you're single, doing what you can for your coach who's put the time into. Like, think about the other people, who've supported you, physios, even just parents, and your support, your friends, and people who really, have looked out for you and helped you on your journey. And I saw something that Conor McGregor said, that, he wants to perform for all those people. He wants to prove to all those people that he was worth the effort that they put into him. So if it's something that you're worrying about, try and find those other reasons, those other little bits around the edges that you can give yourself that psychological edge to not feel like you have to give up.
Yeah, I'm not going to try and impersonate Conor McGregor, but he said something along the lines of, if some people believe in me and I don't put my hardest effort in, that's disrespectful to them, because they rely on me, they believe in me, they want the best for me. So if I don't show up and I don't give 100%, that's just straight out plain disrespectful.
But again, I would say, if you have already stopped, if you're asking this question because you've done that and you feel like there's no way back from it, of course there's a way back from it. Just like Pete said, you can create a new pathway, you can create a new connection and momentum, and it's not the end, and maybe like you said, Pete and I can't think of a specific time that we out and out stopped, but we've all seen athletes do it, good athletes as well, people who've got a lot further than they were at the time. It's not the be all and end all. It's not something to worry about. Just take it as a sign that maybe something you need to work on for next time is a bit of your mental toughness. Do a little bit of research, talk to people, find those little extra ways that you can sort of light the fire and get back on it.
Yeah, so Pete Reed said something really interesting, which is, if you feel pressure, that's a privilege, because not everybody gets to put themselves in a position where you can be under so much pressure that you're thinking about giving up. So if you're in that position where like you're giving up, that you feel like, should I not? Like, you're tempted, think, oh, okay, like I'm actually doing something so good that my body's like, you need to suck it in. So you could think about it differently in terms of, wow, this is actually a good feeling. It means I'm doing something hard. That means I'm doing something that's worth respect. So pressure can be a privilege.
This is segueing really well into our last question here now.
Which is?
So last question from James. Top tips for race day nerves.
Race day nerves. It's going to be a weird question for me to answer, because I have a very specific set of tips for this, but I'm not sure it's going to apply to everybody. So I used to feel a lot more pressure and nerves during the first stage of my career when I rode over in Poland. And that was because I just knew that there were going to be a lot of fast people that I was racing, and I didn't really have that much of an anchor point to decide or to even know how fast or how good of a performance we could put down. As soon as I came over to England and started training over in Henley at Leander, whenever we started racing there, I felt no pressure, because I just knew we were working harder than everybody. I didn't skip any sessions. I was just there, turning up all the time, always thinking about ways that I could improve my rowing, I could improve my technique, my power. So when it came to race day, I don't want to say it because it sounds arrogant, but I'm going to anyway. It felt more as a formality, or unless you do something wrong, this race is going to go well. So my nerves in the second part of my career were more to do with, okay, I know I can row at this standard, so I just need to make sure I stay above it. So I didn't really tend to feel that many nerves in racing, but I think that was a little bit different for you.
Yeah, well, you spoke before about the best way to help calm down nerves is to be prepared. So what you're talking about is getting yourself to the level where you felt so prepared that the nerves had calmed down, which I think is a great thing to do. Yeah, for me, I always struggled a lot with nerves, like really, really struggled. I remember we've just been at Nat Schools Regatta last weekend, so I remember my J15 year at Nat Schools Regatta, like thinking like, geez, if I get like any more nervous than this, I'm going to quit rowing because I can't handle this. It was brutal at times. But I think the way that I dealt with it is that I pushed through, and I got the job done, and we went out and we raced, and it's never as bad as you think it's going to be, and all the awful things that you think are going to happen are not going to happen. Sometimes you might not have the best race, but you complete that race and you realize, oh, I can do it. And every time I went back and raced again, and put a performance in, and occasionally we would win, and that would just, it was afterwards, it was that sense of satisfaction of feeling that I'd conquered the nerves. And for me, I guess that was probably one of the most satisfying things about rowing is conquering my own mind was as rewarding as beating other people, because I suffered with that quite a lot. And then obviously as I got further in my career, that races got bigger and bigger and the nerves were there. But again, like you, really speaking to other people and speaking to psychologists and stuff, and basically understanding that nerves are good, and nerves is your body's way of preparing you. If you weren't nervous, you probably wouldn't care, and then what would be the point of doing it? So kind of understanding that it's good for you, accept it, understand that it's part of racing. And another big one for me was to understand that I'm not special by being nervous, and that everyone gets nervous, and it happens to everyone. And as nervous as you are in your crew, everyone else in every other crew you're racing is going to be as nervous as well. And if they're not going to perform. It requires some level of nervousness, excitement, and energy in order to perform at your best. So sort of just understanding that it's part of what comes with it. And sometimes the more nervous you are, the more special it means to be there. And having left rowing, professional rowing, a few years ago now, and realizing that there's a bit of life that's quite exciting, that being nervous, being a bit scared, being a bit nervous when you're in your sort of general adult life, a 9 to 5 and driving around a normal job. There's not a lot of those times where you can really test yourself and push yourself and have that conversation in your head with that voice that's telling you that you should give up and you should quit and you're not good enough and you're never going to win this medal. Getting an opportunity to tell that to piss off, for me, was a really fun one.
So yeah, I completely agree with this. If you're nervous, that's because you're doing something worthwhile, something that's, potentially something that's bigger than you. So a lot of my athletes last year would say, oh, I'm feeling really nervous for this race. And understanding that nerves and excitement is actually the same emotion under the hood can actually help you, because instead of thinking, oh, I'm really nervous, just think, oh, I'm excited. Like, this is it. You can assign a different meaning to the exact same emotion. I'm not sure that there is a study that's going to directly support this, but nerves and excitement is so closely linked that sometimes it can be almost indistinguishable apart from the meaning that you assign to it. So definitely, you don't want to be too overconfident. Definitely have some form of nerves in order to actually just make sure that you're performing, because that means you care, like you said, and that's going to help. So in terms of top tips, just outwork all your doubts that you might have coming into race day. Don't be start like thinking about the sessions that you've potentially skipped, or that time where you didn't perform as best as you could, or you skipped out on a set of weights. You just don't want to have any of this lying around in your head. You want to think, okay, I'm at the start line. I've done the best I could. Yeah, I'm slightly nervous, but it's going to be fun. I'm excited. Let's go. And also, nerves can definitely be linked to fear, but everybody, like Tom said, is going to go through that stage where you might be a little bit scared, or you might fear the outcome of the race, because obviously you have a certain expectation that you put on yourself. But what you need to do is you need to be brave and you need to be courageous, because what courage is acting in spite of fear. So you might feel it, that's fine, overcome it. Be brave enough, be courageous enough to overcome that, be stronger than that emotion, and then just see how the dominoes of those like negative nerves fall down, and how you beat the voice in your head and you come out on the other side victorious, which I think I haven't got to that same stage where you did with, just beating that voice in your head that tells you like you need to stop. So I best leave that over to you.
I mean, it's a huge topic to talk about. It's a massive part of high level sport, and I don't think it's something that we can answer completely right now. We'll definitely go into it, I'm sure, in more detail with other people. But in terms of just sort of, top tips for race day, assuming sort of race day's coming up soon. We're nearly at Met, Marlow, Henley, big events coming up in the next sort of few months. I would say another big one for me is talk about it. I think that's something I didn't do when I was younger. I was very internal and just worrying with this all on my own, and I think that sort of it almost worsened the idea that no one else felt like me, and I was struggling more than anyone else. But whatever club you're in, speak to your coach, speak to the athletes around you, whether they're in your year group or your group, or speak to some older athletes if they're around. I don't believe that there's anyone that doesn't get nervous for a race. So I don't believe that anyone that you talk to would not have some little tips about how they dealt with it. I think that's a big thing that we see more now, and we talk more about making sure that we're just open with how we feel. And maybe not everyone's going to have advice that you like, but try and sort of pick little bits and pieces out of it. But yeah, I really think that if you speak to some of the people in your Curio coach, the number one thing you're gonna hear is what I used to say to my athletes is like, that's okay, that's not new, that's not crazy. You're not the only one that's ever felt like this. And a lot of that, will help you not worry about it and just focus on what you need to do. And yeah, I guess that would be my final point, would be, if you're really, really struggling with it, focus on the processes, focus on the things that you do every day, focus on making sure that everything's in order, and you've got your whole timings, what everything's going to happen. You've run through possible scenarios of things that might go wrong, things that we've discussed in the past, and just really try and run into that process. And for me, I almost really kind of, as nervous as I got getting more and more to the race, the point when we put the boat on the water and pushed off was kind of the point where I could kind of let a bit of those nerves go, because then I'm just running through my process, back stops, arms only, ready, go. Right. Like, even as I say it now, like, it just makes me feel a bit calmer. Like, I know this, I do this, I've done this 1,000 times over, arms only, body's in, or, first 6 inches from the front, like whatever it is that your cox or your crew or whoever's calling you is going to say. Remember that as big as the nerves get before the event, as soon as you get in your boat, you just focus on your processes.
You'll be in that familiar environment where you've spent hours and hours in preparation for training. And then obviously, if you're in the rowing motion, you're so preoccupied, you're not going to have too much time to think about what if, what that. But I think you've unearthed something really important, which is externalizing your fears and nerves can actually really, really help. Because even David Goggins talks about this. He's like, sometimes I get these excuses popping into my head and I just say them out loud and I realize how stupid I sound, and I just put my shoes on and I go running. So when you say something out loud, it's definitely gonna like add less weight to it, because you can realize, okay, well, I've said it now, it doesn't actually sound that scary, and then other people can tell you something similar too.
Yeah, for sure. I like that. When you sort of make it real, it's never as scary. Like we said, you can run through all the nightmare scenarios. The likelihood is that none of them will really come true.
Any more questions?
We got one more on the Instagram page from Miles, which was, will you sponsor me?
What does that mean? Will you sponsor me? Why would people ask you that question?
So this year was the first year that we've actually trying to support some athletes. Again, we spoke to this a little bit before, but looking at Rowgear, at what it could do for the sport and how we could help. I think we saw that one of the ways that we might be able to help is to support some athletes, and some of the knowledge that we share on this, we can share directly and give them help and support in that way. So the first 3 athletes that we chose was Susie Deer, Josh Bozeman Jones, and Morgan Byron Williams. And again, the reason why we went with those 3 athletes is because we'd already worked together when we coached at Keyboard, so we had some experience working with them, and we thought that was a great place to start. There's a few different things that we've done. So we've kind of helped them increase their profile by getting them on the podcast and talking about their story and their journey. And we're hoping that we can kind of help them help themselves in terms of get themselves out there, maybe potentially as they're all currently involved in the GB system in some way. So maybe potentially look and go and get other sponsorships or other benefits for them. We've had them involved in sort of our photo shoot and stuff, so they're on the website, and there's a few different other ways we've kind of trying to help support them with maybe equipment or kit and things like that. Opportunities to maybe make some money for themselves as well, to be involved in what we're doing with Rowgear. Really happy with how that's gone. I think that's something we definitely we want to do more of. But having come into the racing season now, I think what we're going to do is wait until the start of next season to look at potentially some people we might be happy to bring on board. So potentially at some point, or I said definitely at some point, we will be adding some more athletes to the team. But right now, maybe what we're going to have a look is see how that all the hard work from this season is going to go into results, see where some people are getting. And make some decisions on who we feel like we could help the most.
I think also we're doing quite a lot of work behind the scenes that's not really talked about on the podcast or during our servicing, etc. So we're working on ways in which we can actually in the future support more athletes, and maybe even in a more meaningful way or more of a community way. So it's a question that's probably going to be like put down the line for a little bit, but thank you for asking, Mars, because that is very flattering.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. There are people out there who feel maybe that what we've offered some of the other athletes could be something that could benefit themselves as well. That's really exciting to see. And definitely, we really feel like we're going to try and put that help into people who we could, are in that point, maybe sort of between levels, and sort of push them up, whether that be going from junior to under 23 or trying to get from home countries into GB squad or under 23 to senior squad. I sort of feel like where we can help the most is to try and bridge those gaps, because the standards really moved on a lot, and the difference between junior and under 23 is huge, and again from under 23 to senior, and the step up is massive. And having been through that system and been there, done that, got the t-shirt, as we like to say, I think there's some help that we can offer there. So yeah, watch this space, keep an eye on what we're doing on the sort of social media and Instagram, and for anyone who's interested, there'll definitely be a few more members of the team for next year.
And that's not to say that if you are struggling with something, or you have a question, or you're at a transition period where you feel like you can't really get adequate help from someone, just shoot us a DM, get in touch with us. We can definitely help talk to you about where you are. And we've also had a few people come up to us in our school tent asking for this similar kind of advice. So that is much appreciated. And obviously with rowing, we really love helping people and love helping rowers achieve their goals and make the boat move faster. So I'm not sure we can take a lot of credit for that, but I'm always happy to add my 4 cents now. 4 cents because of inflation.
Yeah, and definitely if you see the Red Rowgear tent and event, like I said, we'll be at Met Marlow. Absolutely come and ask a question. If you think that there's something that we might be able to help with or give you some advice on, there's no way we're going to turn you around. So yeah.
Wicked. Do we have any more questions?
Yeah, one last question. This is a fun one. So this is from Mariam. She says, who would be your dream guest for the podcast?
You go first.
Okay, I'm going to split this into 2 parts. So I'm thinking dream guest in terms of rowing, and then I'm thinking if the podcast got like if anyone could come on, who would you go with? So rowing, I feel like Pinson and Redgrave is too obvious. I've also met both of them already.
Same.
So, although, I've not exactly got to have a long conversation with them, as fun as that would be. But I think for me, I probably in terms of rowing, it's got to be James Cracknell. The guy was I've heard so many stories about the legendary stuff he used to do. I've had guys from the GB squad tell me about how they spent like an entire 2 weeks on altitude camp trying to beat his erg scores. They were like one at a time would go and sit next to him, and like he would still beat every single one of them. So like he was still better than them on every session. His lactate numbers, and then post rowing career, the crazy stuff he's done. Like like the Marathon des Sables at his weight, at his size, to come. I think he's the highest ever placing British athlete ever. Like, and if you watch those documentaries, it's unbelievable mental toughness. And again, like to talk to him about when he did the race across America and got hit by a truck, like coming back from traumatic brain injury, going into Cambridge at that late date and winning a boat race with our friend Dave Bow. I just think that would be, I can't think of a rower, I guess, who I'd rather speak to at the moment. So James, I guess if you're listening, we're keen to have you on.
Please come on, James. Yeah, I think I like what Dave said about the motivation behind why James wanted to do the boat race with Cambridge. It was to also show other people that it doesn't matter how serious of a brain injury you might have had, you can still achieve a lot more than you think. And I think the guy would be such an inspiration. So definitely a good answer.
Absolutely. So you do your rowing one.
So for me, rowing, it would be Andrew Triggs Hodge. Obviously, the stroke of the GB4 from London 2012 Olympics, triple Olympic gold medalist, I think.
Yep.
Yeah, absolute legend. He was at Molesey when I was at Leander, so I didn't have the pleasure of speaking to him that much. I do have one photo with him, I think, from when I was about 17, and that was
fanboy.
A little bit. I mean, the guy is an inspiration. Like I just watched that race of them against the Australians in the final of the London Olympics so many times, and just the sheer technique, the power, the determination. The guy's an absolute tank. Like I would just love to see what's going on in here, and obviously a chance to speak with a rowing idol. I think that would be pretty cool.
Yeah. I mean, or like just unbelievable athlete. I think his first Olympics was 2004 in the 8, and then 2008, 12 and 16 gold. Like to sit on that level for that long, it's unbelievable. And I mean, the list goes on and on. There's so many other people that we'd like to speak to, and hopefully we will do eventually. Like I said, we've got some big names coming. But yeah, no, I mean, there's absolutely no way I'm ever going to turn down Hodgie. Again, if you're listening.
Yeah, and that's not to say that these are the only people that we would like. It would be the dream to speak to on the podcast. I think if we just had to boil it down to one, it would have to be those. But there are at least, I don't have enough fingers on both my hands to count the amount of like rowers that I would love to sit across from the table and speak to, ask them about their experience and their journey as well.
And then, so if we're not limiting ourselves to just rowers, who do you think is the number one overall dream person you'd like to speak to?
So we just touched upon like how breaking through the voice can make you do so much more that you think you're capable of. And I'm not sure if he ever has dabbled with rowing, but he's done just so many ultra marathons and running and world record pull-ups with like 2 broken wrists, and so many of the Navy SEAL training when he was just repeatedly told that it isn't for him, that he should just give up. I would love to talk to David Goggins and speak to him about how to keep breaking through that voice and how to keep unlocking the levels and the mountains to climb in your head that will get you to push yourself beyond your physiological limits and so many other ones. I think the guy is an absolute inspiration. And again, I'm not sure if he's ever rowed on a rowing machine, but I would be happy to kind of like assist him with like his technique and then see what that guy would be capable of. Because I think if there's anybody out there that would do a really good time on a 60-minute ergo in terms of like getting close to a world record, I think that just screams David Goggins. Like he's probably got some world records in rowing that have his name on it. He just needs to go out and claim it. But would you like to speak to Goggins?
No, obviously I would like to speak to him. I've listened to his audiobook. I've watched a lot of the stuff he's done. Yeah, his mental toughness is incredible. And I think what's interesting about him is a lot of people assume that he's, because of the feats of sport that he's done, that he's some incredible athlete, but he's actually not. You know, he's come from a really tough upbringing and tough background. He has issues, I know, like sort of with his body and hips and stuff. He's not like the ultimate, you know, physical specimen. He's been incredibly overweight. Like, you know, the journey's unbelievable. Probably one of the reasons I didn't say him is I just think he's too huge that he would ever come and talk to us. But let's find out. But
Who's going to carry the boat?
Yeah, I don't know who I would want to speak to the most. I guess in terms of like having now started the podcast, it's been really fun. I really enjoyed it. And a sort of the ultimate podcaster is Joe Rogan. So I've listened to so much of what he's talked. You know, probably been listening to him since about 2010 at least. I think I don't even know whether our audience would be interested in it, but just as someone that I'd like to talk to, especially on the podcast, because you get to answer sort of questions that they have to answer. If it's just one-on-one, you can throw questions away, but like when you're interviewing or when you're talking to someone on camera, you get a more in-depth answer, which is really fun. I guess if I sort of went back and asked 14-year-old me who I'd most like to talk to, I've read a lot of autobiographies. I got absolutely obsessed, especially when I got into rowing. I got totally obsessed with autobiographies of athletes. Read everything, Redgrave, Pinson, Frost, everything, all of their autobiographies, cover to cover, multiple times. But probably the first one I ever read about an athlete who I sort of saw like, wow, you can force yourself into a position that no one else thought was possible by just keep going. You know, something we've talked about, other people just don't give up, just keep going, just keep turning up. For me, at the time when I was a kid, I was big into skateboarding. So Tony Hawk, I think, having read his autobiography, you know, skating was big when he was tiny, but then it died out. It died a death, and he just kept going. And, you know, everyone said it was a phase and it was a fad and it's disappeared and there was no money in it. I remember there's times when, you know, he was saying he was getting a check for royalties for like $3 a month or something. Like it just didn't exist. But he just kept going and he kept going and he kept going. He got better and better and better and he worked at it. And he pioneered the sport and he invented stuff. And obviously now he's one of the most famous athletes on the world, on the planet. So yeah, Tony, come on if you're listening.
So would you rather have Joe Rogan on Last Stroke Counts, or would you rather have us go on Jerry? What do you think would be more interesting?
It would be interesting to get interviewed by him. I'm not sure he's sort of that interested in what we're doing at the moment, but like I said, we've discussed where we want to take this podcast, and hopefully in the future we can branch out into certainly sort of mental fortitude is a big part of it, but how that crosses over from sport into life, into work, how you can take lessons that you've learned from rowing over. So have we've got to that place? Absolutely, I'd love to be. And I mean, to go on anyone's podcast, I would feel quite like special at the moment. Like I don't feel like we've got there yet, but maybe we'll see.
We'll just keep producing episodes, keep doing it one by one.
Keep going. That's
exactly
the best advice you can get.
And that's kind of the advice that we're also giving you guys as well. So we're just following the words that we're spewing out as well. So just episode at a time, keep turning up and
keep watching, keep turning up and watching.
Yeah, definitely. So is that all of the questions?
Yeah, that's what we got this time.
So what are we doing soon? We're going to Met Regatta on Saturday and Sunday.
Yep. Met Regatta this weekend, which is coming up. And then got a couple exciting episodes to film next week. I don't know if we've mentioned it, but we've got Alex Partridge coming on. The week after that, we will have Ben Lewis. If you don't know who he is, he's coached just about everywhere. Leander Molesey, Thames, Tideway Scullers, Washington. I think what's going to be interesting with Ben is he's got kind of links to the military. And when we talk about this sort of perseverance and mental fortitude, that definitely crosses over into that aspect. So that's going to be really fun to listen to. We've got a bunch more people coming up, lined up. We're going to put in dates for really exciting people. A good cross-section of everyone who's doing anything there is to do in rowing, whether that be charity work, coaching, coxing, high level, GB or otherwise. International athletes as well we're starting to look at. So we're really excited about that. Hopefully everyone else is as well. Yeah.
Seeing how good of a response we've had to the episode that we just did with John Collins, we're definitely working hard to bring the best guests that we can possibly grab a hold of for you guys. So I think you've got some exciting things to look forward to with Last Stroke Counts. And obviously, that's just still very much the beginning of this journey. So I'm excited thinking about this, but also like there's a lot of movement behind the scenes of what we're trying to bring into the show, and also to other aspects of what Rowgear is doing.
Yeah.
Awesome. So I think that concludes everything for today's episode. If you do want to win that custom painted red row machine, go to rowgear.com/giveaway, and then you can help support Jim and Ian on their incredible pursuit across the Atlantic Ocean. So I think on that note, easy there.
Cue the music.